Welcome to the Volpe Report podcast, the state's premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians. I'm your host, Chuck Volpe. Join us now as we speak to this week's guest.
The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We have for you today a very special Volpe Report. This past Wednesday, former President Donald J. Trump came to Scranton for a rally that was held at the Riverfront Sports Complex. This was my first Trump rally, and it was the wild and raucous event that I had seen and heard about through television coverage and news stories. I was fortunate through mutual associations to have an opportunity to meet with President Trump privately prior to his taking the stage. I had been told that he is a different person in private than he is according to his public persona. I can now attest that that is true. He was warm and personable and engaging, and while we talked some politics, he also talked with my wife Ellen and informed me of what I already knew, that I'm a lucky guy. However, the stage beckoned with thousands of his supporters sitting row upon row and crowding the enormous plaza full, as according to the words of Domingo Ortega. And apologies, that was a quote from his famous poem about a man in the arena. Since there was not enough time to fill a 30-minute show, we will be joined today by his national co-chairwoman of his transition team, former Congresswoman and former presidential candidate, Democratic presidential candidate, Tulsi Gabbard. She shares that honor of co-chairmanship of his national committee with another former Volpe guest, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., also a former Democrat. The bad news for the Democratic Party is Tulsi recently was one of their best and brightest stars for their future. A young, articulate Democratic Congresswoman from Hawaii who served her country in the United States Army, achieving the rank of Major in the U.S. Army Reserve. Having started her military career with her enlistment in the Hawaiian Army National Guard. When Tulsi enlisted, she was already serving as a representative in the Hawaiian state legislature. She was then deployed to Iraq, serving with the 29th Support Battalion. Upon her return to America, Tulsi entered the Accelerated Officer Candidate School and graduated at the top of her class. She was then commissioned as a second lieutenant and served as an Army Military Police Officer, or MP. She was then stationed in Kuwait. After her deployment, which included commendations and medals, including the Meritorious Service Medal, she achieved the rank of Major, as I had already acknowledged. She is currently a Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Army Reserve. Educationally, Tulsi was homeschooled through high school before spending 2 years at an all-girls prep school in the Philippines. She then went on to Hawaii Pacific University, earning her bachelor's degree in business administration with a concentration in international business. In 2012, armed with her background in the Hawaiian state legislature, Tulsi ran as a Democrat for the United States Congress, and winning, became the first Samoan American member of Congress. She rose quickly through the ranks of leadership in the Democratic Party, becoming vice chair of the DNC, otherwise known as the Democratic National Committee. In 2016, she endorsed Bernie Sanders' campaign for president. With her star in the rise, in February 2019, she announced her candidacy in the Democratic primary for President of the United States, becoming the first female combat veteran to run for president. She participated in a number of national debates, but accused the media and the Democratic Party of interference in the primary process, threatening to boycott the fourth debate before deciding to participate. On March 3, 2020, Tulsi became the second woman of color, after Shirley Chisholm, and the first Asian American candidate to earn primary delegates. She was the only non-white Democratic Party candidate to earn delegates in 2020. Kamala Harris earned exactly 0, having ended her campaign before the first primary. Tulsi will discuss on today's show why she endorsed President Trump, as well as why she left the Democratic Party, and the existential threat this country faces at this important crossroads election.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial. The area's premier political talk show, The Volpe Report.
Tulsi, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Thank you so much. It's great to join you.
Thank you. As we were just briefly talking off camera, I had the pleasure of meeting with President Trump yesterday when he came to Scranton, Pennsylvania, at his rally at Riverfront, and that's my first time to actually really speak to him in a private way. My wife was with me as well, and I had been told by my good friend Elmo Rinaldi, who's very close to the Trump family, he's very close to Eric Trump, and he is the one that arranged the meeting. So at any rate, about his television persona and what he's like on the stump and in campaigns, and is different than we get to spend time with him privately. So I can confirm that. Wonderful man. He has a fan in my wife forever. I can tell you that. But I thought it good though, because this Sunday show is dedicated to his visit and his campaign. But before that, I want to kind of really talk, because you obviously have a national, an important role in that campaign. So I thought it appropriate to give a little bit of some perspective, and I always view as the old lawyer in me, like what would a jury want to know? What would viewers want to know about you? So let me start with this, and let me give you a little. I guess the lawyer lays the foundation. My background. So we have something in common. I was a Democrat for 45 years. My father served in the House of Representatives. He was Democratic chairman from this highly 3-1 Democratic region, Scranton area of northeastern Pennsylvania. As a very young man, I can't state with authority that I was the youngest ever, but I can say with authority one of the youngest ever to run a serious campaign for governor of Pennsylvania. I did that 30 years ago. Probably not as a surprise to you. I used to give, of course, I was giving 10 stump speeches a day, Pennsylvania being a big state, and every time I got done, at least one or two people in the audience would say, "Are you sure you're not a Republican?" But I always pointed out that there was a place for someone like me, a more conservative. Yeah. I say a Kennedy Democrat, and I mean a John F. Kennedy Democrat, not Ted Kennedy Democrat. So with that as background, I now, 4 years ago, have an epiphany. I watch our state terrorized by our Democratic progressive governor, Tom Wolf. He shut everything down. Loved ones, Tulsi, were not allowed to visit dying family members in the hospital or attend funerals. At the same very time, when he's out in a crowd of 1,000 protesters, defund the police in the summer of George Floyd. So now we have your story. A Democratic Congresswoman from Hawaii, a military leader, rank as high as major, meritorious service awards, tours in Kuwait and Iraq, served our country, and then go all the way up to become, you far surpass me. You were a candidate, Democratic candidate for president of the United States of America, and ran a very significant campaign. And now you sit here, like Bobby Kennedy, like Chuck Volpe, having left the Democratic Party. So that backdrop, how did all that happen, and how do you decide to make the move you made, and why do you sit here today in the position you do?
Yeah, thanks, Chuck, and I'm grateful to join you and all of your viewers here today, really during such a critical time. When I was 21 years old, I ran for State House in Hawaii. And at that point in time, I had to make a decision about what party to join. I didn't come from a family that had a strong political legacy. My parents homeschooled all 5 of us kids, and they taught us to think for ourselves, to be critical thinkers. And I was a very independent-minded person. And so at that time, I looked at both parties. This was over 20 years ago, and I was drawn to the Democrat Party because at that time, it still represented the party of John F. Kennedy. It still was a big open tent party that welcomed people with different views and different backgrounds, different religions, different ideas. They stood up for free speech, even the free speech rights of those who said things that they found to be offensive and abhorrent. They stood up for civil rights. They stood up for civil liberties. They stood up and fought for the little guy, the everyday working man and woman in this country. That's the legacy of the Democrat Party in Hawaii, was fighting for the plantation workers against the corporate elitist Republican leaders at that time. And fast forward to where we are today. Obviously, you've talked about some of the things that I've done in politics since. But the Democrat Party of today is wholly unrecognizable from the party that I joined, which is why I left the Democrat Party a few years ago. I wrote a book in detail about my experiences and what drove me to make that decision. The book is called For Love of Country, and that really captures who I am, what's in my heart, and what drives my decisions. I've always been an independent-minded person, even as a Democrat for almost 20 years. But my decisions are centered around what's in the best interest of the American people and our country, period. I still serve in the U.S. Army Reserve today. I'm a lieutenant colonel and a battalion commander. I'm grateful to be able to have the opportunity to serve my country in different ways, which is why I made the decision to endorse President Trump in this election. There are a lot of different issues that are at stake here, and we'll have some time to talk through, I think, some of the biggest ones. But I think my experience, your experience, the experience of Bobby Kennedy reflects perhaps a lot of the experiences that people in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and in different parts of Pennsylvania have gone through or are going through themselves, of having been a part of the Democrat Party for a long time, but really looking at what today's Democrat Party leadership stands for. And it goes directly against the Constitution. It goes directly against our fundamental God-given rights and freedoms enshrined in the Constitution, things like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, our right to defend ourselves and our loved ones, our Second Amendment rights, our Fourth Amendment rights to our civil liberties, our privacy, our protection against illegal and warrantless search and seizure by our government. It is no longer, the Democrat Party is no longer a party of peace. They have become the party of warmongers. Under President Trump, no new wars were started, and he exercised the kind of strength and courage that we expect our commander-in-chief to have in going out and engaging in direct diplomacy, in meeting with dictators and authoritarian leaders and adversaries, just as he would meet with allies and partners and friends in the pursuit of peace, in the pursuit of denuclearization and walking us back from the brink of nuclear war. You look at the last almost 4 years under President Biden and Vice President Harris, and they have, in both of their words, they have essentially said they were co-presidents. She was a part of every major decision that President Biden made. She said in an interview just a few days ago that there is not a single thing that comes to mind that she would have done differently from Joe Biden on any issue. Joe Biden himself said he trusts her so much, he delegated every issue on domestic policy and foreign policy to Kamala Harris. So fundamentally, when we look at where we are as a country today, and one of the things I think I'll start on this one because it hits close to home. For me, I've deployed to war zones in the Middle East and in Africa. I've served now for over 21 years. And so having a commander-in-chief who actually cares about the lives and sacrifices of my brothers and sisters in uniform matters a whole lot to me. I got involved with national politics specifically because of my first deployment to Iraq, where I served in a medical unit. And I saw the result of politicians who don't care about our men and women in uniform, no matter how much lip service they give. And they make these decisions so easily to go and launch a regime change war here. Let's go topple a dictator there. Let's go be the world's police, without actually thinking through, is this the best thing for the American people? Is this going to strengthen our national security? What is the cost of this going to be, and who is going to pay the price? Kamala Harris, in her debate with President Trump, she boldly looked at all of us in the camera and said there is not a single active duty service member deployed in any combat zone anywhere in the world for the first time in a century. She said it with total confidence, either lying directly to all of us, the American people, or she really just doesn't know what's going on in the world. She doesn't know what's going on with our military. She doesn't know that there are friends of mine who are deployed to Syria, to Jordan, to Lebanon, to countries around the world where they are directly engaged in and in harm's way. Whatever the case may be, whether she's lying to us or she is the vice president of the United States over the last 3.5 years, and she has no freaking clue what our military is doing, around the world, that alone disqualifies her from serving as our commander in chief. But if that's not enough, let's look at where we are today. We are closer to the brink of World War III in multiple regions in the world, not just one. And according to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, the doomsday clock sits just 90 seconds to midnight. We are closer to the brink of nuclear war that could start in an instant than we ever have been before in our country's history. These things have not happened by accident. We are here, less safe and less secure today than we ever have been because of Kamala Harris.
That's a wonderful and in-depth answer. A couple of points on your comments. One, I vote lie. I vote she's lying because she has lied about so many other things.
This is true.
It seems to be, again, the old trial lawyer.
She also doesn't seem to know much about a lot of things. So,
well, that too. I mean, so actually you could make a compelling argument. There's a lot of vacuousness there. But having said that, let me turn to something else that I think is an important issue for us. You know, the Democrats, obviously, and I mean national Democrats. I have many, many, many good Democratic working family friends that are as appalled at what the direction of the national party as you and I have been. But excluding them, you know, one of the issues that the radical, I'll call progressive left, that has captured the Democratic Party, they have captured it. All you need to do is look at the transformation of someone like Nancy Pelosi. In 2018, when Ocasio-Cortez and her socialist Marxist friends came out with the Green New Deal, she scoffed and called it the Green Dream. It'll never happen. And then she became an ardent advocate of that Green New Deal. And many others. How this happened, I really don't know. That led to partly my departure. But they're presenting a dream of America. And it starts with the teachers' unions, with our children and what's being taught in schools. It goes across all of education. It goes across institutions and politics. I'm talking about wokeness. So at any rate, and they've captured the Democratic Party, but they are perpetrating, is the word I'm looking for, a dream, a contrary vision of America. Not the vision I grew up with of the greatest country, Ronald Reagan's shiny city on a hill, but a country that's almost dark and evil, an oppressor country, a country that is a colonialist, a capturer, displacing indigenous people, a country that is a racist, systemically and structurally American country. And they present that. We have two leaders now of the National Democratic Party, Tulsi, leading the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, two avowed Marxist socialists. I'm shocked that in the 21st century, I'm even having this conversation. Because you remember as a candidate yourself 4 short years ago, how did they get Joe Biden? I did views on this 4 years ago. Well, how they got him is they were in a state of panic. Because after New Hampshire and Iowa, who was there? Bernie Sanders, socialist. Who was there? Elizabeth Warren, socialist. Peter Buttigieg, and thankfully you still. But you were the only beacon of light in all that. But having said that, they were appalled and afraid because they knew a socialist could not win in America and defeat Donald Trump. They dusted off another person that was still in that race, Joe Biden, the old chestnut, put him in his basement and helped him become president of the United States. 4 years later, they have now completely gone over to pushing Tim Walz, pushing Kamala Harris on the American people. So where I needed to get that background, let me explain where it gets to you. You check a lot of woke boxes. An intelligent, educated woman, Samoan American woman. Check box. All the identity groups, the victimized that they try to claim identity groups that the Democratic Party has pushed. And I would argue that you're the epitome of the American dream I believe in. As you've talked, and I've talked about your wonderful credentials, and all the way to almost president of the United States. So what would you say to those people that try to represent the America, not the ones that you and I believe in or that you fought for our country, and thank you for your service, but the ones they are trying to, like, kind of this fraud on all of America with complicity of the national media? Your answer.
Well, look, I think the first thing that it's important to point out is you've outlined some of the very radical policies that they actually stand for and that their record reflects that they stand for. Obviously, and Pennsylvania voters know this, I think, probably more than most, which is Kamala Harris's long record of wanting to ban fracking. And this goes all the way back to her days as Attorney General in California. Her statements now saying that she has never been for banning fracking, nor will she ever be. That is a bold-faced lie, and quite frankly, I find it incredibly insulting that she says this, knowing that, as the young kids say these days, the receipts exist that prove her record states otherwise. You look at what Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are doing. They're trying to run as far away from those radical extreme policies and positions that they actually stand for, because they know that that's not what voters want. Voters don't want the government coming in and saying, no, you are not allowed to own a gas-powered vehicle. You will only be able to buy electric vehicles. They don't want a government coming in and telling us, I like to cook, Chuck. I find it a very a relaxing thing to do. I like to cook, and so does my husband. We enjoy it, and we prefer cooking with a gas stove. The government wants to come in and say, no, you're not allowed to cook with a gas stove. We're sitting here today in this conversation in the wake of this horrific disaster that was left behind in the wake of Hurricane Helene, Hurricane Milton roaring through Florida. And I've heard from some folks in Western North Carolina when I was there that the only way that they survived was because they had a gas-powered vehicle. They had a gas-powered stove, and they had cash. Those with electric vehicles and by the way, FEMA delivering electric-powered chainsaws, which are absolutely useless in these areas that have no power still. It just shows the insanity of some of these policies that they're pushing for and how disconnected from reality they are. Fundamentally, to me, Chuck, this comes down to freedom. And in almost every respect, whether it's freedom of speech, they want to ban speech that they don't like by labeling it as misinformation, disinformation, or hate speech. You've heard this from Kamala Harris. You've heard it from Tim Walz. You heard it just the other day from Hillary Clinton, who told Rachel Maddow that she thinks that speech labeled as misinformation or disinformation people should be charged with a crime for spreading this. And who gets to decide what speech qualifies as misinformation or disinformation? They do. And as we're seeing in the wake of these hurricanes, they are attacking anyone who dares to criticize their disaster response, who dares to criticize FEMA or criticize Kamala Harris in their disaster response as misinformation, disinformation, and dangerous. Fundamentally, if we truly believe in these foundational principles that you and I are speaking of, that we are committed to, that we are passionate in protecting and defending, as I believe most Americans are, these are the constitutional principles that our country was founded upon. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have shown through their actions and through their policies, not just in the past, but in the present, that they do not believe in them and that they reject them. So you and I may disagree or agree on any one of a number of issues, but the beautiful thing about America is we have the right and freedom to have a conversation where I might say, hey, Chuck, I don't agree with you on that, and here's why. Or you might say, hey, Tulsi, here's where I think you're wrong, and let me tell you why. And we can have a back and forth, as we should in a thriving democracy. Under a Kamala Harris presidency, she will silence those who dare to criticize her government and even go so far as to label us as disloyal or traitors or dangerous to our country.
Well, I know we're down to only a minute or two, and I'll get you out on this, Tulsi. I watched your interview with Bill Maher as Chris Matthews, I believe, sat right next to you. And by the way, when you got done with him, he had reminded me of a snowman that had been in an unusually warm winter day with the sun hitting. It was starting to melt. He was literally melting in front of the camera. But he raised an issue that's one of the gravamins of this whole campaign, and that's the Democrats, since they can't run on the economy, they can't run on our foreign situation and our wars, they can't run on their support for the military, they can't run on what's happening with education. So God knows they can't run on our southern border. So what's left for them to talk about? All they have left really is, well, we can't vote for Donald Trump and the Republicans. They're a threat to democracy, which I believe was Chris Matthews' point when he sat with you during that interview. And now my view is, as Bobby Kennedy has said, the party that's a threat to democracy is the one that's trying to censor us. The Democrats.
Yes.
The one trying to take away our freedoms. The Democrats. The ones that have weaponized the Justice Department through lawfare and are putting Republicans like Donald Trump are trying to put them in jail. But ending with now, I know you only have a minute left. You kind of said it beautifully and eloquently to Chris Matthews sitting next to you. Why is that not the case? That in fact, the Democrats are much more the threat to democracy than Donald Trump.
When we look at the pillars of our democracy, it's rooted in our fundamental rights and freedoms, this open, thriving marketplace of ideas, and the rule of law. When we look at what's gone on over these past 4 years under a Democrat presidency, specifically under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, we have seen them undermining our democracy. They tried to remove Donald Trump's name from the ballot in over 32 states because they didn't even want voters to have the option to choose. Thank God there was a unanimous vote in the Supreme Court that specifically said that. Voters are the ones who get to choose who they want to be president. There's not some government entity that gets to predetermine whose names are allowed to be on the ballot. They continue to try to silence and censor our free speech. Hillary Clinton and John Kerry both just in the last week said that the First Amendment is an obstacle to their being able to gain total control. They're not even hiding what their goals and objectives are. If we value freedom, if we value our right as voters to be able to decide who we want to govern and lead us as our founders envisioned for us, if we want to ensure that we have our First Amendment rights, our Second Amendment rights, those God-given rights enshrined in our Constitution, there is only one choice in this election to vote for, which is why I've endorsed President Trump. He is our best hope to protect our democracy, to protect our right to free speech, to protect our Second Amendment rights, and to put us back on this path towards a future where we can live in a safe and secure community and work towards a peaceful and prosperous future. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for Dick Cheney and a vote for exactly the opposite. It is a vote for more war. It is a vote for our freedoms being taken away and more of the same kind of economic hardship that we've seen over these past 4 years. We want change. We need change. President Trump is the change candidate in this election.
Thank you so much, Tulsi, for your time. You've been eloquent as usual, and I sleep better at night knowing there are people like you using your national platform to educate the American people. I try in this media market to do the same. But thank you for your service to our country again, and Godspeed on your continued journey.
Thank you so much, Chuck. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks, Tulsi.
Hi, I'm Robin Medeiros. I am a super volunteer for President Donald J. Trump. I will be carrying the electoral votes down on December 17th, and I was an alternate delegate at the Republican National Convention. I wanted to let you know that we are having events on Tuesdays. Over the next 3 Tuesdays, starting October 15th, we will have mail-in ballot applications down in front of voter registration, 123 Wyoming Avenue in Scranton. You can come down between the hours of 9 a.m. and 6 p.m., and we will have someone there. If you have any questions, you can ask them. You can get your mail-in ballot request, fill it out, take it right in, and get your ballot to vote. So we look forward to seeing you, and you must have that done by October 29th. So come and join us on the next 3 Tuesdays, and we'll get you all set up. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Volpe Report podcast. Be sure to visit our YouTube and Facebook pages for upcoming episodes. You can catch up on the Volpe Report podcast on your favorite podcast provider.